DVD, or one DVD basically, and then put it in.
I'm gonna call this meeting of Laramie Planning Commission to order. The clerk would call the roll.
Pacino, absent. Evans.
Yes.
Is here. Heiser White,
Yes.
Moody,
Here.
O'Toole, Schneider,
Here.
and Mattimore.
Here.
That's 6 present, 1 absent.
Are there any, any changes to the agenda? Anything new that we haven't got? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda in the minutes. Second. Second by Moody. All those in favor? Aye. Agenda is approved. Planning Commission meeting minutes, we approved those. Okay, let's go to citizen comments. Anybody got? Oh, hi, you snuck in. Did you ride your bicycle?
Here, she took her canoe.
Oh. All right, no, hearing no citizen comments, nobody wishes to speak. We'll go on to Planning Commission and staff reports. Guys, got something?
2 quick announcements. Good evening, Chair, members of the commission. So for our Forge Laramie Comprehensive Plan, our survey, our first round survey is ending the day after Labor Day. So I guess that's September 2nd. Just wanted to make this commission aware that we're up to 834 responses, which to our knowledge is the most that any planning effort in recent memory has received. But we would really like to get to 4 digits, 1,000. So whatever you guys can do to spread the word about the survey, gathering community input in this last week it's open would be greatly appreciated. Secondly, the wayfinding signs, as you know, may have seen around town, have been going up at the interstate interchanges and a couple on Grand and other locations. Total of 24 new signs went up in the last 2 weeks. So once the 3rd Street project, the wide out 3rd Street project gets completely done, we'll move into kind of phase 3 and rounding out that wayfinding plan, but just wanted to give an update on that as well.
Donald?
There's a mysterious sign. Oh crap. There's a mysterious sign for Pilot Hill on Grand, but it doesn't tell you where to turn off. Is it indicating, is there a clearer sign as to how to get on Pilot Hill? So as you get on Grand from the east, it says Pilot Hill 2 miles away, but then there's not a sign telling you where to turn off for Pilot Hill.
Here through you. So are you referring to the new signs?
I am
Or
referring
the brown signs? Because there's a couple,
Oh.
there's another wayfinding effort that took place a couple of years ago where they're much smaller, kind of more the Forest Service brown color.
I think these are the new signs that have just gone up in the last couple of months.
If it's a new one, so we had trouble citing one at it would be 30th and Grand. That would be the logical place to have that right, but that's where we had trouble citing that one, but we're working on reciting. On the other side, there is a sign that's going in.
But there is not a sign at the old Walmart.
There's not.
Shouldn't there be? Because that's the easiest way to get to it.
Well, that's one trailhead.
Right.
But I think the main wayfinding effort was pointing, as far as Pilot Hill's concerned, to the 45th and Crow.
Right. It's not illegal to have 2 signs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just puzzling that you see the sign and then people coming into town who, might want to let their dog out or something, do not have a clear path. They know it's there somewhere, but there's not a clear signage to how to actually get to it, having been told it exists.
As I said, like there's one that is supposed to go in at that 30th and Graham, not at the location you're talking about.
Right,
We
right,
can
right.
talk about that more at Snowy Range Academy, but
Right.
the one at 30th and Grand has been tough just because of a lot of landscaping there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But we are working on
Okay.
on a new location for that.
Bueno.
If you're coming from the west, there is a sign there, but that doesn't help. You're
Yeah, we just hope they turn around and go back when they're done. Okay, we'll carry on. Any disclosures, ex parte communication, conflicts of interest? Hearing none, we will go to no old business. We'll go to new business, and Derek, take it away.
Chair, Commission, I let the chair know this. We do kind of have about an hour time limit today. Just there's some other meetings tonight, City Council, the County Commissioners and Rock River related to SPT. And so if for some reason we don't get done with this, not the end of the world. So just letting you know, but if you do, it's fine too. So just putting it out there ahead of time so everybody can get to their meetings on time. The item before you is a text amendment, so amendments to the Laramie Municipal Code related to housing. We've been working on these amendments for a little while in our office and are once again kind of just items that we continue to see come up during development projects. And we then begin making a list and then start working through things that we think that we can get through and bring forward to both the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council. And so the amendment package here you have are just related to code amendments that have a housing related component to it. You'll see in the amendment package, a lot of our past studies relate to these types of codes that we're proposing here. And generally speaking, and I'm not going to go into detail in all of the different plans and efforts that we've done related to housing, but they all kind of point towards different directions in the housing realm and codes and how we can improve those. And for the most part, the city of Laramie has actually tackled a lot of the areas of these codes. This commission and many of you sitting here have seen probably 4 or 5 iterations of housing amendments that have gone through. And this one here will not probably be the last one. We will continue to work on these and continue to refine code related to these housing text amendments. And so what I was going to do is I'm just going to kind of quickly go through and briefly touch on each of the items that are in the report. Some of them are very basic and pretty straightforward. There's a couple that I'm going to give you just a little bit more explanation on it, just to provide you some background on it. And then we will go from there. And so kind of kicking off, we have a process called minor administrative modification. This gives staff 20% flexibility related to numerical items within code. We are proposing that this percentage be increased to 25%, so a 5% increase. This gives staff just a little bit more flexibility when we're talking about maybe parking space numbers or a setback or the number of trees or things, anything numerical in code. We do this already at the 20%. The process that's involved here does require notification of adjacent property owners. So it's not completely outside of not notifying anybody, but we find this as a pretty simple way and an easy way for staff to be planners and try to provide flexibility. But remember, it's a minor administrative modification, which we often are looking for kind of alternatives, and it's not necessarily just a reduction always. So that's one of the very first changes we're bringing forward. The next one here is related to just some terminology found in the zoning chapter, which is 1508. We just noticed that in 1508, it's unclear that multifamily is permitted in the NB zone. It's already in the use table, but it excluded it when it describes what that zone is. So we just put in the term multifamily just so that if somebody's looking at that portion of code, they don't automatically just like excluded out of their mind. Really, this one doesn't fundamentally change anything. It's more really clarity, but we felt it was important to put that out there. The next amendment is the third amendment in your package. I would consider this a fairly substantial amendment. This is an amendment where if you take a look at the current zoning table, which is the first portion of the zoning table, and then look at the second zoning table, you're going to see that through this amendment process of approved, we are going to be kind of opening the doors in terms of where we allow multifamily housing and development within the community. Currently, in some of our zoning districts, such as our business zoning districts and B zoning districts and commercial zoning districts, the multifamilies or multifamily uses, townhouse uses, things like that require a conditional use process. Really, best practices across the country is going to a place where these types of multifamily housing is permitted pretty much anywhere, except for some of these more intense zoning districts, which you'll see that change being made in industrial zones or industrial park areas. Those will remain or will be now conditional uses and be something that this board would consider. The fundamentals of this is how do we make the housing process as simple and as straightforward, and this puts it purely in a permitting realm. It doesn't make it required to go before a board and take that time to go through that type of a process, or potentially have the uncertainty of going through a board where may or may not be approved. This is definitely a bigger change. We're also noting that probably one thing I would point out is the modular home community. That's something similar to like what you would see at Prairie's Edge is being opened up into that area and realm of most zoning districts, which it looks and feels like a single family's neighborhood anyway. And so that's why you see that conditional use permitted in those zoning districts, because there are still some nuances that we do have to look at in those types of communities, because typically they're not necessarily set up with land ownership as a component of their development process. And so we felt that the conditional use process would give us a little bit of oversight, which we think we need in that type of a use. Amendment 4 is a little bit along the same lines. We noted we just have had some questions over the last year about retirement homes, nursing homes, and assisted living facilities. Really, we kind of consider all those about the same type of a use. So what we've done here is just grouped those terms all into one portion of the use table and combined them there, as well as providing conditionally in other zoning districts for these uses to be located in more zoning districts, and so more opportunity for this use. Amendment 5 is providing information in an additional section where we're just making it clear that with an accessory dwelling unit that an additional parking space is not required. This is just pushing along the idea that if we're going to allow accessory dwelling units, that we don't want parking to really inhibit that. And so this would open that and allow that for on a property. We're just making it clear so that that's known there. Amendment 6. You all as a planning commission have seen a few of these over the last few years. This is an alternative front lot line adjustment. This is where there's usually a corner lot, and the applicant is requesting that not the narrow side. So under code, the most narrow side of a lot is the front of the lot always. What this option does is this changes the permissions from coming before you as a board, going through the public process and coming up before a board, which takes a lot of time, to request alternative front lot line through the minor administrative modification process. If you recall, we still notify all adjacent property owners and they can contact our office about that. But this allows this just to be a staff decision in determining whether we're okay with the front of a lot to be the other side. Essentially, there's usually two sides. So. Amendment 7 that we have here proposed is related to flexibility related to parking requirements. What we're doing here is we are noting that parking on the street and within a certain distance of the front door can count towards the parking for the property. This is just to provide additional flexibility related to parking. If you remember from back some of the very first amendments we made, parking is often one of the areas cited of cost as well as difficulty in making projects work. This just gives us the ability that kind of logical parking spots on the front of the property can be used, and this makes it really clear in code that we're open to that as an option. And so that's what amendment number 7 is. Amendment number 8 is an amendment that allows for developers, if they would like to reduce the amount of on-site parking that they have, that they can provide covered parking for bicycles. So this isn't just a bicycle rack. This is full-on covered, protected parking for bikes on the site, and allows them to, if approved by our offices, to be essentially credited for parking spaces. So up to a certain amount, as you'll see in the amendment. Amendment number 9 is an amendment, once again, related to parking. This parking is related to ADA parking. And what we've found is that there were some discrepancies in the building code and our code. So the Laramie Municipal Code. And so what we did is we went back, and it was causing confusion is what really the essence of this amendment was. We were finding that people were looking into building code, which is the correct place to look for ADA parking requirements that meet federal ADA standards. And they were looking at our table, which as you went through the process, got you 2 different numbers. Ultimately, we just want to make sure that we're providing the appropriate amount of ADA parking when we have any type of development, which the amendment you see here removes the table that we had developed in our code that was getting kind of throwing the numbers off. And what you see here is adopting a table that we already had in the code and replicating it in the additional section for the next section of code, which helps then make it clear how many spaces you're required to provide. The language that you see added in is directly from International Building Code. And this allows us to be exactly the same so that there's no confusion. In the end, what it kind of boils down to is there's actually a few less ADA spaces as you kind of like ramp up in intensity and get to the really high numbers. And so that's what this proposal is related to. The other point I would make out of this is it does provide a little bit more detail than our current code has, so that people have a little bit better understanding of like widths and some things like that for an ADA space. Amendment number 10 is related to the space between the front of a garage, essentially to the sidewalk. It's the driveway space. It's your driveway space at your house in front of your garage. And under code currently, there's a minimum requirement of 20 feet. What this amendment allows us to do is go down to 15 feet. We do look and make sure that there's no safety issues or line of sight issues. What we find and why we're bringing this forward is we found that with certain development proposals, having that shorter distance gives us some flexibility in moving buildings a little bit closer to the front of the property and allowing people to use the lots that are a little bit smaller for maybe 2 units instead of 1 because of distance and spaces for parking and things like that. We've just run into this in a few projects. A lot of times we've been able to maybe work through it, but we think this will give us just a little bit of flexibility to put in a little bit shorter driveway but still allow for people to have some parking spaces available. Note though, when we get down to 15 feet, we're saying it's not a parking space because this has a garage and we're saying that they're parking in their garage, that's their parking space. And so we're just making that clear so that if there's a property that needs multiple parking spaces for whatever reason, so a multi-unit, that we're not counting too short of a driveway or something like that for a parking space. Amendment number 11 is a amendment that mirrors language that's found in amendment number 10, just in two different sections of code. We address this distance in two different parts of code for clarity purposes. So it's really, that's all we're doing there. Amendment number 12 is actually a fairly large amendment. Here is what I would do, what I would say when I summarize amendment number 12. The focus that I want to point out on amendment number 12 is related to the paving oversizing costs that the city contributes to a development. One of the largest things that we hear is that the cost of doing large infrastructure is difficult for developers to take care of. Right now, the city, when it comes to water and sewer lines, we pay 100% of any oversizing costs that we request. So for instance, on a water line, if the development has, let's say, a few hundred homes and it needs an 8-inch water line to serve the subdivision, but we know as a city and our master planning says that we really need a 10-inch water line, we pay for that extra 2 inches essentially so that we get the 10-inch water line that we need. We do not do that for paving. Paving, we have traditionally allowed for arterial streets. Developer pays 66%, city pays 34%, collector pays 88%, or developer pays 88%, and the city pays 12%. Remember, arterial is our largest street. The collector is just a little bit smaller, but they're both major streets. They're not a local street. They're not like what you see maybe just on a residential neighborhood or anything like that. The section you see here has been amended to, one, clarify the process. The process to require public bidding. We have to have those public bid documents to know that we're being oversized, that the oversizing we're paying is being done legitimately. But the focus is really on the changes that we're seeing in the paving and the proportionate amount that the city versus the developer pays. You'll see we are now going for an arterial street, that's our largest street, to a 50-50 cost share. You'll see though in the collector share that the share doesn't change much. It goes from 85 to 15. Those numbers are based on the actual value and sizing of those streets and how much they increase. Remember, an arterial street is much larger than the local street, and the change to a collector isn't quite as much, and that's why the difference is there. We worked with our public works department to kind of develop this new section, but we feel this is a pretty big change in how we do business here at the city related to this oversizing. We're hoping that this is one of those things that maybe changes how properties that are located along our collectors and arterials can fund their projects and maybe make it more cost effective for future development on those streets, because it does require them to fund those costs. And so we're hoping that these increased cost shares do make a difference. And so you'll see a lot of the language though that's changed. It's very similar. We did some reorganization in here. But for the most part, that's the main change and the importance of this change related to housing. Amendment 13 is related to dwelling commercial. This is just noting in the definition that in providing us flexibility that dwelling commercial no longer just has to be above or below something, but could also be behind or attached. We've realized through a lot of different projects, there's a lot of different ways we could make this dwelling commercial work. We don't want to restrict it just to being above or below a commercial space. And then lastly, the dwelling, live, work. Once again, this is just a definitional change, providing clarity that and flexibility related to adding in the detached one family and townhomes. So all the types of single family homes that we have in our code. Just to note that we do allow that dwelling, live, work within those areas. This is one of those things that you find within codes and housing, that if people can live and work at the same place, that they can maybe make their house or their housing situation work a little bit better. And so With that, we do publish notice in the newspaper for these items, just like we do all text amendments. I remember this one will go before city council for 3 additional readings and another public hearing as well. And so with that, we've received no public comments related to this at this time. And aside from that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Council, any questions? Go ahead.
On when the 14,
Okay.
is commercial, anyone that had like self-employed, LLC, sole proprietors, anyone that had a self-employed business, do they get lumped into commercial?
Chair Commission, so dwelling commercial is typically probably a more intense than like just kind of like working from home type of a thing. Remember, dwelling commercial would be you have a commercial space, so probably like a storefront, maybe a full business operation. It might be an LLC. It's not, doesn't have to be, but like think a retail store where somebody maybe lives in a unit that's behind it or above it or below it. Commonly found probably in more like think you're like downtown areas, but really the intent of this is to permit, and we just considered one, a good example would be the one we just considered at Avid Corporation the other day. That's a commercial space where the dwelling is adjacent to it, and is part of the structure. And so that's typically what you're seeing. Whereas I would say your dwelling, live, work is typically more home related with a small work component. Seeing, an office where, somebody does water work or something, or,
Sure.
and that'd be kind of your 2 differences typically.
Is there any special permitting you have to do to have a small business in your home? Not storefront?
So
Where's that fit?
great question. So dwelling commercial is typically, so commercial is the main component, dwelling's the secondary component. Typically, those are found in most business areas and things like that. And if it's a permitted use and the structure is permitted for that type of use, you would just be able to do it. Might need to get a building permit if you wanted to change walls or do things like that. In the dwelling, live, work, we have a set of standards that are in place. You do not need to get a permit. You do not have to get licensed, and really it's more on a complaint basis if somebody's doing something that they shouldn't be in there. Dwelling, live, work is really geared towards things like I said, single person office, an accountant, a counselor, things like that. Could be a one-on-one trainer. It could be a hairstylist. There's quite a few uses that are permitted in that. And really the idea is to allow that to be pretty wide open, to be flexible, and to encourage business development, really.
Donald, you got a question?
So I got 2 questions. One is on amendment number 12. Do we have standards for storm drains? Are they somewhere else? Or are they different in some way?
No, yes, Chair, through you, the storm drains are found in another section where the water and the sewer lines are found also. And so they're just not in this section at all.
So does the metrics that are changed here, do they need to be changed for storm drains?
No, these tables and these metrics only apply to the paving and asphalting. So it's like paving and asphalting section.
And is that because the storm drain size is standard? I mean, there's no change is that the reason?
Chair, through you. So if you remember, I was talking about like a water and sewer lines, and storm drains would be the same thing. If an oversizing is requested for that, we pay for that extra because it's a known quantity, like a specific size basically. And so that's how we handle that in other projects. And so
you don't think there's a need to change that formula the way you're changing the formula here?
correct. We wouldn't need to change that. It would be a whole different section of code if we were even to look at anything, but right now we pay for it all. So any oversizing, we pay for all of that.
Okay, and the other one was, I think number 10. the reducing the size of driveways from 20 feet to 15 feet. Do I understand that correctly?
Correct.
I notice in town, at least maybe it's just one neighbor I have, but he has a big ass truck with an extended cab. And I guess I should use the term F-350. And they're more than 20 feet. And this guy regularly parks, so he obstructs the sidewalk. I have not firebombed his truck, but I am thinking about it. So for folks who have these really long vehicles, are you making allowance for that? In other words, this will increase the likelihood of encountering big ass trucks on the sidewalk.
Chair, Commission, I would recommend not firebombing anyone. There's a much simpler and safer way to do that. All you have to do is contact the Laramie Police Department. Blocking a sidewalk is found in code as a non-permitted thing you're supposed to do, and they will ticket your car.
But you don't understand the satisfaction of firebombing a big ass truck.
Don't get your Irish here.
Leave that choice up to you, but we actually, I would say our office, I mean, we're not the ones that deal with it, but we get those calls pretty regularly. Contacting the non-emergency line at the Laramie Police Department, they'll go out and ticket, or they've towed vehicles if they've had to. They do what they need to do.
I'm not so sure, but seriously, does this not compound the likelihood of that happening? Trucks are common in Wyoming. I don't know if you've noticed that.
There is a possibility this could happen. And I think that we believe that we would rather go this route and take a few more calls or make a few calls in and open the door a little bit up related to housing.
And I believe
where we're
I
at.
need a beer. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Or do you have any?
Give parking credit to off-street parking. You're trying to get enough parking for the people to go. Would there be a sign on the street saying this parking along the street is reserved for tenants or whatever, and that the streets are just getting absolutely clogged by, we're drowning in vehicles. If it's on-street parking is making the credit happen, then maybe you could give it.
So, yeah, Chair, so the intent is no, we do not want to sign the streets. We don't want to make public street parking only permitted by the people that are adjacent to it. Currently we have rules in place for 24-hour parking. If you own the property in front of, the property in front of you on the street, somebody's parked there longer than 24 hours, you can contact Laramie Police Department. They'll tag the car. They're supposed to move it. The intent is really with this is to allow them potentially to request a couple spaces on property to not be there, which we're hoping frees up some more land to allow for potentially more units or more space or to make a project more feasible. I would say when we've done multifamily housing projects, most of the requests we have some on-street parking permissions already in code. A lot of times it's maybe asking for 1 or 2 spaces, sometimes a few more, but it's usually just in front of the property. This doesn't open the door so much in our eyes, but it does provide a little bit more flexibility is all.
All right, I've got a question about number 8. Okay, you can get 15% credit on your parking if you put in a covered bicycle rack, or bicycle facility. Well, first question is, would it be accessible for motorcycles, those silly battery powered scooters and other things like that? But the main problem I see with it is, are there design requirements for this? What size, in order to get let's say I build a 100 unit apartment project, all right, and I want to cut my parking spaces down by 15%. How big a bicycle structure am I required to build? Does it record, where on the property should it be located? I got 100-car parking lot. I could put that bicycle rack out in a Thule's somewhere, and you still have to walk a mile to get to the front door. Are there any other additional requirements on that?
So Chair, we do indicate in a different section of code where bicycle racks have to be located. There is a distance from the front. So you can't just put it out in the back 40 and get 15% reduction. We didn't though include specific design standards for the covered parking. There's a lot of ways to provide like covered weatherproof parking. What we're going to be looking at is making sure that there's within reason that a bike can go in there. If somebody, I guess, puts a scooter in it, I don't know. I don't know. But what we're looking at is, during the development stage, they're going to have to show us that they've got these bike lockers and, that they logically can fit a bike. If they can't, we don't have to approve it. And that's what our plan is right now.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
envision grass huts and wood sheds being called bicycle parking, or,
I mean, we're gonna have to just we're gonna have to see what kind of proposals we get and then decide, if we start running into lots of issues, that's where I guess then we'll have to do some hand holding and put design standards in. But I'm gonna trust our developers and hope that they can maybe come up with a good idea there. So.
Jake?
On that same note, with the parking, current code requires some level of a bicycle parking stall. Would this replace that or be in addition to it?
This would be something that you could use, like, let's say you put in 10 covered bike parking spaces. This would count as your bike parking still. Yeah. It's bike parking. It's just that this is only giving you the permission to remove a few parking spaces on the site. If you go to that level where you don't have to, right? You could always still just put in a bike rack. So.
John, did you have a question? Just for your edification, page 10. Where do you go? Yeah, top of the page. Where at least one parking space should be provided. And then below that, forever 6 ADA parking spaces should be every. So there you go. There's your spelling and correction for the day.
So page
10.
While we're on that, I did have a question about that language there, and it's at the bottom of 9. So this is the language you pulled from the International Building Code, right?
Yep.
But that first Roman numeral little I, I'm having trouble understanding what it means. And so I just want to make sure we're not just like throwing something in that's then not clear. So, and I guess the part it says, okay, so if you're dealing with these types of apartments and as defined, all right, that are required to have accessible units, and then type A or B dwelling are the types of accessible units. At least 2%, but not less than 1 of each type of parking space shall be accessible. What is that reference each type of parking space to?
Chair, Commission. So what that's related to is in this type of housing. So I'm just going to give you the generics we put in. So you see where it says like apartments, congregated living, live, work, lodging. That's a summarization of what the R2, R3, and R4 standards are. We wanted to give some people an idea because not everybody is familiar with that. Those are defined in building code, so you can go look those up and see all the gory details of what this applies to. But each type of parking space is related to a van accessible space and a regular ADA parking space. They're a little bit different, just like widths, and there's a different loading zone for when somebody is in a van that has like a wheelchair lift. And that's what that's referencing. And so we, like I said, we use the code that was found in the
Right.
within the building code to keep that the same. To reduce confusion, even though the building code, I would say it's not like the best language, I would agree, so.
Yeah, okay, that, yeah. So at the very least, you're having it one of a regular ADA and one of a van. Okay,
A lot of times what you'll see in developments is they'll actually put the loading space for a van space in and then just put ADA spaces on both sides. And then technically you actually have two van spaces, but that's more than a regular space. So, but that's how they usually do it in the field, I guess, is what I would say.
Any other questions?
I have
Sure.
another, just going back to the First Amendment. I just wanted a little bit more background on what the minor modification process involves. Because I understand that the idea, which is a very good and important one, is that there's certain types, a certain amount of discretion that it's useful for the staff, and it also provides that the planning commission may choose to exercise it too. And so I'm assuming that a minor modification probably doesn't have notice. Or if you could just describe the basic distinction. What's easier about the minor modification? Because the change from 20 to 25, I mean, it's going to, you could then have a change that it is a quarter of the amount of the standard. And so in my mind, that is a meaningful change. And so I just want to understand the consequences of changing that percentage.
Yeah, so share through you again, so the minor administrative modification process is there's an application found on our website. Almost always these are in association with some sort of development proposal, right? So a a homeowner, whoever has a project that's going through, and there's one of these numerical standards that are maybe causing some issue because it's just not quite to code. The 25%, you're right, it goes to a quarter. It's a quarter of a project. I think we spend a lot of time in our office kind of discussing like to what level is too much. We want to try this 25% out. That there is a notice process. So remember, we notify all adjacent property owners of this amendment request. So for instance, if somebody would like to have a little bit of a modified setback that falls within this minor administrative modification process, we will notify those property owners adjacent, which are logically the most affected, to provide public comment on it and for us to consider. What we've found is that literally the whole time that we've done this, we've had only a couple people actually make any type of comment to us about it. Most of the calls or questions that we might get when we send the notice out is they just want clarity on what we're actually doing. This process too is kind of one of those that allows us sometimes to be just planners and really look at something a little bit more critically and gives us that flexibility. And so it's not done solely outside of planning commission, I mean, it's, these things, if we keep it at 20%, none of those still come before planning commission, right? It's only that other one for lot line adjustments or alternative front lot lines that change something that comes before you today, and it would not come before you in the future.
Oh, I may have misunderstood.
So that's why I was saying that, because I think you were kind of alluding that this is changing that. This section here only changes the percentage. The other section, which is change, was amendment 6. Amendment 6 is where the front of a property is designated as the narrow side of a lot.
Right.
And what we often find is it's on corner lots almost solely. Someone will say, well, I'd like the front of my front setback to be applied to this other side, the bigger side. And typically what we're looking at with those is it's more related to making sure that there's utility easements up front, they can get power and gas and water and things like that into the property. And also too, that it's not creating some sort of adverse effect on an adjacent property owner because now there's, I don't know, a driveway too close to something, or I don't know, there's not very many times where we find it's that big of a deal. You all have considered a handful of them, probably 10 or 15 over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think every single one of them has been approved, and that there's no one ever comes to talk to you about it. And it's kind of one of those things, how do we streamline that process and just make it a little bit more simple for the development?
So just to make sure I understand the relationship between 6 and 1. So this, it doesn't matter the size of the alternative front lot line. It will go through the minor administrative modification process, which is fine based on kind of the experience. But I understood Amendment 1 to change the percentage. It's expanding when you would use the minor administrative modification for any type of standard. There was a general development and zoning district standard. So you are changing the percentage. Now you can do it up to 25% for whatever type of standard might be applicable, right?
Chair, yes, correct. Yep. 100%. Any numerical standard, we would be able to change it up to 25% instead of 20. So
Donald, you had another one?
So this is just a question. As we hear this discussion of the Ivanson board talking about putting in a new retirement or nursing home, I've heard several times folks advocating for the need for a respite care facility. And I don't know enough about respite care to know whether these are standalone or they're rolled into a nursing home. Can they be standalone facilities, and should provision be made for respite care? So I'm talking about, this is under amend table 1510-1, allowable uses. And so you've introduced the word retirement home along with nursing home, which makes a lot of sense. But is there any need to have respite care in there?
So we have kind of two categories, and we probably would just have to find out a little bit more detail about what level of medical attention is being given. Because if you see the one that we're considering changing is that retirement, nursing, or assisted living facility. But right below that, just because it's right below it in the table, is we have the hospice care facility. And often those two kind of areas, there's sometimes a little bit of overlap. Sometimes people may go into hospice, but then leave hospice and go into one of these other facilities. I'll tell you, a lot of those areas, those two facilities are fairly similar. But we probably respite care, I guess, would probably go in retirement home areas, probably where we would just put it anyway, without it being specifically saying respite care.
So my understanding of respite care is a place where if you're a carer and you're taking care of someone, that person can then go for a day so that the carer gets some relief. Is that your understanding?
Correct. And I would say many assisted living and nursing home facilities have that built in, they have those spaces available, and you bring somebody that you're caring for to that location, and it's just wrapped into that kind
Okay,
of use.
as long as it's
Yeah.
not all kind of on its own. I just don't know enough about it, but
You could have a full respite care facility, and we would just group it in those same categories. Very similar functionality and use type in our
Okay,
opinion.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just have one last question. on
No, you
minor
go right ahead.
modifications. On the minor administrative modifications. Does somebody have an automatic right to get it? Or do you still have the discretion? So say now we're allowing for 25%. You can still, if it's the kind of thing under those circumstances, would you be able to exercise your discretion not to use the minor modification? Or is it kind of an automatic right that now the developer has by putting it in that category?
It is not an automatic right. In the code, we do have standards that we look at when we're considering a minor administrative modification. And so when we're looking at this, we are not just, we'll just do it for whatever. We want to make sure that, and I'll just quickly go through it. It just says, helps increase project density, while meeting criteria. Changes, we don't allow for things like changes in use. You can't use minor administrative modification to change the use table. There's some things in here about, let's see, you can't use minor administrative modification to circumvent, let's say, the planning commission. So if planning commission through conditional use says, no, we want 15 trees in the front, they can't apply for a minor administrative modification and say, no, I want a 25% reduction. So there's criteria here so that we have some basis. There's also approval criteria. We have to make sure it's consistent with the comp plan, that there's not modifications that are found in other codes or found like in the building code. So like safety things, we're not going to reduce the number of fire hydrants on a site or things like that. It doesn't encroach into any types of easements, so or affect easements really. That there's no adverse impacts to health, safety, general welfare, public, or something that can't be substantially mitigated. And then also too, that the modification is either necessary to address some regular practical difficulty of the site or achieves a better design or degree of design related to the specifics of the property. So
That's good. Yeah. And I also see, if I'm reading this correctly, that there is a process to appeal a decision that the department, the staff makes to the planning commission. And that could be, if you deny the developer, they could appeal to us. And if there's an adjacent property owner that didn't want you to grant it, I would think they could also appeal
Correct.
to us, the planning.
Correct.
I feel a lot better. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Derek. Council wish to discuss this. Any comments?
I think they make a lot of sense. I mean, I think they're providing the kind of flexibility that we want.
Having,
I think the staff should have.
yeah, having been in the construction and development business in my previous life, any flexibility is well appreciated. The code can get too rigid. Chair will entertain a motion if there's no other discussion.
I will recommend that the city council approve amendments to LMC Title 15 for the purpose of updating definitions, processes, and design standards related to housing in the city code as recommended by staff.
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second. It's a code change. Let's have a roll call. Oh, public comment. Okay. No. Yeah, we should have a roll call for this one. All right. Mr. Clerk, if you would.
Pacino,
Aye.
Evans. Heiser White. Moody,
Aye.
O'Toole,
Yes.
Schneider.
Aye.
And Matamore.
Aye.
That's 7 yeses, 0 nos.
That seems to, unless there's any other long-range planning projects, no variances, so the chair will entertain a motion. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Made it with 6 minutes to spare.
Yeah.
Yeah.